Karthik, thanks a lot once again for joining us to have this discussion on what role operations can play in insurance across scale, across customer delight and profitability, and also to try and understand a little bit about what you're seeing at the intersection of AI and insurance as well. So maybe just to start off with, we've obviously done our fair bit of trying to introduce you to our audience and to the community members, but would love to know more about what your career journey has been like. Also, super curious to understand how you moved from being a veteran in the army to a veteran in the BFSI domain here in India, and what, if any, of the principles, learnings from your time as an army officer you still carry over into your now professional career in insurance.
Absolutely. Firstly, thank you, Rohit, and glad to be here. It's good to see that our association is building around, and you have been really helpful in introducing me to the new tech, the new world, the new age world of, let's say, AI or insure tech and fintech as we speak. So, I would say that my career graph so far, in the 25 years of a career that I could say I have, has been a little bit non-linear and primarily probably sector and industry agnostic. So yes, I started my career with the armed forces. So uh, pretty early on, at the age of 17, when I graduated from whatever plus two or class 12th, as we call it, I got into NDA. NDA was good about 3 years of not only graduation, but full on military training with specializations by the time I graduated out of it, and then a year in the IMA. So 4 years of rigorous military training, and then getting into infantry, which is the front line of the armed forces or the army. And then I kind of volunteered for special forces for a bit, and then I did a large part within combat situations in Jammu and Kashmir, one of our hottest deployment zones in the Indian Army. And then I got into corporate. So when I got into corporate, it was around, I had a lot that I thought I could bring in from the armed forces. It kind of molds you as a person, as a professional, which a large part of us would have experienced over, let's say, 10 to 15 years of service, right? In the corporate. You get it early on in the armed forces because of the environment, the entire organizational structure with which, Army operates with. We all know that a lot of the management, models have come out from World War II and after, and are now created as management models in the corporate world. So that was an advantage, which I definitely thought that I would get in. Obviously, had to get an executive MBA, which is where I went back into college, and then I realized that. I've always been in the front end of any organization, whether it was infantry or special forces, was actually leading in the front. And if I had to do the similar approach in corporate, one of the things that I thought was, can I get the bread and butter home into the corporate, which is nothing but sales, distribution, marketing, functions like that, where I could kind of really go out and kind of build businesses. Uh, Unfortunately, I think around the time in 2006 and 7, the corporate understanding about what veterans bring onto the table was very limited. And it took a while for me to kind of prove it, that this is a competency and a skill, and a little bit of an attitude that I bring on, which could kind of help me build businesses. So what I tried to do was I joined a startup. Startup and not the flavor in those days. I refused a few PPOs, placement offers from the college. And then I went and joined and the alumni of our college who were kind of incubating a broking setup, a real estate broking setup. And broking in those days in the real estate space was more a mom and pop kind of an approach on one extreme. And the other extreme were international property consulting firms like JLL and the Cushman of the world or CBREs of the world who were playing. So there's a huge spectrum gap. And these guys wanted to build something which was much more organized and much more Indianized, which one could say. And that gave me a lot of exposure to understand, okay, how do you make clients? How do you go and do business development? How do you actually sell a product, right, on the ground? And then kind of understand the nuances to kind of build it. I was fortunate to move from there to another real estate entity, which is Cushman, which is the IPC, where I did something that I was not educated or trained for. I ended up doing capital markets, which was having private equity funds on one side who had dedicated mandate and funds towards the real estate. And then I had developers on the other side who had projects, portfolios, or enterprise level equities slash mezzanine infusions that they were looking for. So that was both basically marrying the two to kind of get those investments done. Um, so obviously learned on the job. I didn't know. I would rather say that I didn't know anything about structured finance. And the first 6 months were amazing because I learned so many things, right from shareholder agreements being negotiated night long as you're kind of closing a deal to understanding what structures, what instruments would work, how would structuring happen, what were the regulations in terms of preferred capital to versus debt, how would you structure debt in a mezzanine way. So this was amazing. And then one lunch turned my life around. And the lunch was a lunch with one of an old veteran who was into HR. And he and I had connected in our college when he came to as an industry representative to our college during our placement work. And he and I had lunch and in Gurgaon, and he spoke about Prudential Financial, kind of setting up a JV in India with DLF at that time. And Prudential, kind of runs a group insurance program for serving military of the US Army for the last 70, 80 years. And Prudential is a 150-year-old organization. And they do that for the serving personnel. They do that for veterans. They do that for families of serving personnel. And that's a space that they really liked. And when they came into India, they thought that they could kind of leverage that expertise and build something in India. And I realized that in India, while I was serving in the army, I already had a group insurance product that was managed, administered by Army itself through the AGIF platform, the Army Group Insurance platform, which was reinsured by GIC. And I realized that that space was already taken. So over the lunch, we kind of then said, okay, do you really think there are financial needs and gaps in insurance that a soldier has to go through, even though he may have a group insurance product or a policy? And is there a space for us to create an individual life product and an entire business around it? So that came out as a blueprint. And over 1 year, the next 1 year, I helped them kind of create this into a little bit more structural business plan while I was still doing my work in Cushman. This is just out of curiosity and learning that I did. And this was way back in 2008. And after a year, I said, I got a call and said, you know what, enough of creating it from the outside. It's an entrepreneurial opportunity. You have a safety net while being doing something which is entrepreneurial. Never before in the Indian insurance industry has an armed forces personnel been looked at as a potential customer. Why? Because it's a antithesis to insurance, right? When you know that the customer has high occupational risk, it's generally not an ideal customer segment that you want to dive into. And that was interesting because I proved that wrong over the next, 16 years now. Why? Because when we created that business, we realized that an armed forces personnel is far more fitter, far more medically fit, far more mobile, and the occupational risk is just a cliche in the sense that when you look at data right from 1948, the first aggression that Indian Army had, to all the wars that have been fought and all the skirmishes that have been fought and all the skirmishes that are happening on a daily basis in the counterinsurgency operations, the cash mortality is not so high. There's probably 150 times more mortality in road traffic accidents every day in cities like Delhi, Gurgaon, Bangalore, Pune put together. So the mortality experience came out to be far more better. The customer segment came out to be far more richer in terms of propensity to pay, discipline, etc., etc. So that's how the journey into insurance took place. Longish answer to your question, Rohit. Uh, what do I what do I really leverage from the armed forces? Uh, Plan A in a combat situation never works. Is something that I've realized over 6.5 years of active service. That whenever I used to go for a combat ops, I used to have a plan A, plan B, and plan C. Plan A never worked because there would be external disruptions, situational analysis would change as you're kind of getting into a firefight. The way the firefight would emerge would be so different that you would have to deploy probably a B or a C, or on the at this time kind of come up with a plan D, which would kind of get into the situation. So that pivoting is something that got ingrained as what they say in muscle memory. So in situations in corporate, in situations in business, when you need to kind of pivot and pivot quickly, given the disruptions that are happening today on a daily basis, is something I really carry. Number two, I think how to put structure into an ambiguous situation. So ambiguity is also something that the corporate world is now accepting for the last 10 years. They're saying from a VUCA to another thought process is where people are going towards, trying to be more agile, understanding that the ambiguous situations are something that you've got to live in. That army teaches you. It teaches you how to kind of look at an ambiguous situation, dive into it, and then kind of create a structure or a process around it for you to kind of navigate that ambiguous situation. Those are some key things that I bring in. And the third, I think I learned a lot in the army was execution rigor. All strategies fail, all plans fail when you're not able to kind of add on an execution rigor around it, a mechanism around it. It may look great on paper, but large part of it, we thought this would work, but then this did not work. Not because the idea maybe have been wrong, but maybe because you did not put the full might behind the entire execution of that idea or the strategy. So these three things that I think really, really helped me even today, while it's been around what 18 years out of the army, more time in corporate than in the army, but I still carry those around.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Karthik. It was wonderful to sort of learn about your journey, to hear about how all of these things have intermeshed and interplayed.